Where we left off is I had shown you how to make this intro section of flashing images. The next thing we need to work on is the overlays from this point. I was watching the original Marvel footage and I noticed that it showed different superhero characters coming into scene, sort of being zoomed in. But I also noticed that there was some text that went along with it. I could see words stuffed in there. And this is where it's kind of important. Whether it's making a Marvel intro or making anything that you're trying to replicate, you want to try to focus in on the things that are happening and really pay attention to those little details so that you can try to reproduce them. I read some of that text and I could see they were showing like Captain America and it would say Steve Rogers or Captain America, almost like we were reading the files from S.H.I.E.L.D. or Nick Fury. So I was like, that's something we can replicate. So the way I did that, I actually made a text overlay. And I'll show you how to do this. I just want to show you what it looks like right now. You can see there's this green screen. I made up names, right? Susan Stryker, given the mission of assembling a team of heroes. I basically just created some text overlays with names and sort of a short description. And if you notice, see what I did some in white and some in black because I noticed that's what was happening in the Marvel intro. Now, the way to do this is the finished product here, but let me show you how to actually create that. All I did was I started by, up in the Media tab, I clicked on Sample Colors, and I brought down the green screen. And the reason we're bringing down green is we're going to type on top of it, export it, and then bring it back in and eliminate the green. And that will allow that text to float over whatever else we're superimposing it onto. So I've got a big block of green here, right, that I just stretched out. You can stretch it, make it as long as you need. And then up in the Titles tab, let's pick a very basic title. Let's try subtitle 2. We'll bring that down and see what that looks like. Okay, so this is just a basic text. If we click on this, you can see it'll open up in the upper left the ability to change this text. Let's put some text in and we'll make up a name, Frank Stern. That sounds like a superhero name. Given powers at birth for the good of humanity. Man, there's a reason I don't write for Marvel. Now listen, you can highlight all of this. See how that's all sort of aligned to the left? Up here, you can change the alignment and center it or go to the right or spread it out. That's what this alignment does. I'm going to go for this center alignment. I think that works the best. You can even highlight here. If you highlight a section and go up to the font, you can change just the size of the font of the highlighted section. Even though it's all in the same text block, whatever's highlighted will be affected by the font size. And then you can also move it around. Let's get that kind of centered, right? You can align this right into the middle. That's the best place for it to be. We'll have more power to move it around where we want. The particular font that they used was kind of interesting. It wasn't this font. I think I went and found whatever looked more like a typewriter font. That's kind of it. That's not too far off. That's one. The other thing you want to pay attention to is any of the outlines that are going on. I've got a text style here. I use the very first option, which is the simplest text style, just a color. Here I have white. If I wanted to change this, I could go over to the text color and go to black, and that would change it all to black. And that's all I did. It's really simple. So here's a white text section. That's probably longer than I need. It happens really quickly. So there's one. An easy way to make more is to copy that, highlight it, right-click, hit copy, put your playhead where you want the next one. Let's leave a little space in between them, and then paste. And that'll give us the exact same one we just had. The good thing about that is it's already preset in the middle with the font we want. That makes this part easier. We can just highlight, delete the text, Susan Gray, and then give her a different power. We'll say, chosen to save humanity. Sorry, Susan, you've got a lot on your plate this week. But let's do this. Let's also change the font color this time to black. So now what you can see, if I scroll back, I've got right in front, Frank Stern, then it pauses, and then it comes up with Susan Gray. And you can do that as many times as you want. at this point, all you would do, let me shorten this, I'll delete that second half. I would take this entire thing, figure out how many of these I was going to do, right? For every character I'm going to have pop on screen, I want to have a description to go along with them. I'm just going to do 2, but in the final draft, I actually did many. And all I'm going to do from this point is hit export. Choose settings that are really high. 30 frames per second is good, but we want it really crisp. I tend to put my custom bitrate up around 40,000. That seems to give me a pretty crisp look. The audio section, because there's no audio here, it doesn't matter. You don't have to change that at all. But then just export it. And then once that's all done exporting, we can import that again and put it over our footage that we've created from the intro before. Here's the original footage that I showed you how to make the Flash intro. And here's my text overlay. And as you see my text overlay, all you see is the green and the letters, and it doesn't allow you to see the track underneath. The reason we use this green is if you click on that green footage and then open up the Chroma Key dropdown, it's preset to green. If we activate it, it immediately eliminates the green and we see the letters. Do you see what's going on there? That's why we use the green, because we can pull it out. It just eliminates the green, but the white letters are still there. Now you can adjust this. You can adjust the amount of tolerance. You can adjust the offset to get a little more of the white to show through. You can even control the edge thickness to really get those letters to pop the way you want, the edge feather. We want a tight edge because we're using a text image here. So let's pull the edge feather back, but use your eye on this. Again, don't just look at the things that I'm doing because the way you apply it might be different. So somewhere in there, we have this text. Now you can see it's popping up. So I have my underlay base here. This is the first Flash image that we created. Here are my text areas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find each, and where they stop, I'm going to split them. So I highlight this upper text, I split, and then I move that back. Now I have the next set of text, Connor Klaus. Stop that. Let me split it. I'll move it over a little bit. The reason I made it all at once is I'm trying to save time when I do my edit. I'll split that again. So I'm just separating each section that I've created of text. Now, another thing I want to do is separate these tracks because I want to affect them differently. I don't have to, but I'm one of those guys that I like to be able to separate things into different tracks so I know what's going on. You can click up here and add a video track, and that'll give you another video track to add things into so you could drag them up and put them into another track. Or you can literally actually just grab a piece, bring it up, and Filmora will automatically create another track for you. This is a really cool feature. It just saves a step. Whenever there's an ability to save a step, I'm all about that. So I can just drag stuff up. I'm staggering these because I want them to happen at different times, right? I don't want them to really overlap, and you'll see why. So now I have these descriptions for each character that's going to come into the screen, but I don't have the characters yet. So what you want to do is find your characters. As I said before, I'm not using Marvel characters. They have a heavy copyright enforcement on all of their characters. I'm not using any of their material because I don't want to get any copyright strikes on my channel. But all I did was I found some images of superheroes or superhero-looking characters, and I brought them in. I'm going to select a few here. If I hold the control button and select different images, it allows me to bring them all in at once. That's a cool little trick to save time too. So now I have all of these sort of superhero images. And what I noticed was in the original Marvel footage, it started off with this intro thing happening, and then it started getting into these characters. I'm going to move some of this out of the way. Now, what happened is somewhere around the spot where it started to turn yellow into blue, characters started getting zoomed in, right? Some of these superheroes started zooming into frame. And for that, I just found some images that were PNG images. And when I say PNG, it just means there's no background to them. So when you find a file of a character, you want not a JPEG, you want a .png. So the character, when you bring it in, there's no background, it overlays and it allows the track below it to show through. Now here's where you're going to be doing some interesting motion. They didn't just appear on screen. If I just laid a character here, he would just pop up, and that doesn't do what I wanted. in the Marvel intro, they sort of zoomed into frame. So the way to do that is we want to lock our main footage. I'm going to start by right-clicking on my character footage. I'm going to click on crop and zoom, and I want to make it look like we were zooming out. It's like the character starts close and then moves back. It's like they shoot into frame. So the way to do that is I'm going to hit pan and zoom. I want to start closer up and then move out. Let me see how that looks. If you see the motion, you can see, yeah, he looks like he's moving backwards. But one of the problems is, see how he looks cut off here? That's something you have to deal with. We want to make sure that that character zooms properly and doesn't look sliced off. As I said, I locked my main footage. Now I can go up to the upper right, click on this, and I can move it so that he's on the edge and doesn't look like he's getting cropped off. I can also increase the size of him, which does another cool thing. So when that zoom happens, he pops into frame, and then he doesn't look cropped. Part of this is the duration is a little long. I would say, let me shrink this down. It'll make that zoom happen faster. That's kind of cool. But one thing that happens is he kind of dissolves in. That came in harsh. We want more of a fade in and fade out. So let's start here by, let's left click on the image of our superhero, and then up in the transition tab, let's look for dissolve. There's dissolve. Let's bring that down and put it at the beginning of our footage. Left click, hold, and shrink it. I want a fast dissolve into this character. See how he came in? That's what that dissolve does. That's a really cool trick. I'm going to grab and stretch that out. All I'm doing to stretch this is left click up on the timeline. See my little arrow? Left click and pull to the right to make it longer. Pull to the left to make it shorter. So I added a dissolve. That works for anything, your footage, your dissolve effects. I'm doing the same thing with my dissolve effect. I want a fast dissolve in. Boom, see him dissolve in? And I want him to go away too, because he'll just end and disappear. That doesn't quite work for me. So let's grab another dissolve and put it at the end so that he sort of disappears away. Let me shrink that down. Let's see how that works. Boom, he kind of moves and disappears. This is all a thing that you have to do with your eye. You're adjusting all of this to do the right speed, the right zoom. This is all your eye. There is no right or wrong way. It's what looks right to you. The amount of zoom, the amount of dissolve, how quickly the effects happen. This is all judgment calls. And this is where that text comes into play. On the track above, whose name did I use here? Nope, Susan. That doesn't look like a Susan. Let's see if we have a guy's name. Behavior comes. Sure, right, perfect. I'm going to stagger that into the track above, have the superhero come into frame, and right when he comes into frame, I want to also have like a text image sort of describing who he is. That's sort of what I noticed in the Marvel footage. It was like the character came in and the text came in, sometimes before the character, sometimes after, but they overlaid and moved in a zooming effect towards that center. So the same thing I just did with this character, I want to do with this text. So I'm going to highlight that, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to add a crop and zoom. Let's click on pan and zoom. When we first click on pan and zoom, it starts with the start, it's sort of a zoom in, starts open and zooms in towards the end. I want to reverse that. I want to start in and move out. So let's zoom this into, I'm going to start with the name Javier Combs. Don't ask me where I got these names from. And hit OK. And that's going to give me a zooming effect like that. The only thing I don't like is this is very straight. It's very horizontal. The Marvel intro seems to have more like angled text. So we'll want to adjust that up in this upper right preview window. And as I said before, whenever you go to move something up in the preview window, lock the other screens. So down on the left, hit the lock on all of the other things so you don't accidentally click up here and move the superhero accidentally or move the background footage. That can be a pain in the butt. Now when I click up here, the only screen I'm going to be moving is this text screen. Okay, so I left click hold and I can move it around. Now I could stretch it out and make it bigger, I can make it smaller, but this little handle up top allows me to put a little angle on it. Kind of like that, right? That's kind of cool. And it allows me to go, bam, heavier combs exposed to gamma radiation. If you noticed, it kind of came in pretty cool. Boom, it shot in. I like the way that came in, but where it ends, it just stops. Did you see that end? It just clipped. It just disappeared. And we don't want that harsh transition. So we know what to do here from the superhero footage. Let's left click on it. And I already have my transitions loaded. Transition tab, find the dissolve, bring dissolve down, lay it onto this text track, and let's shrink it so just the very end dissolves away. Let's see how that looks. Boom, much better. So you see that? Now I've got the background track rolling. I've got superheroes jumping into the scene. I've got text coming in. And all we're going to do is repeat that process with other superheroes. We'll bring down another superhero into the top track above it, staggered. And this stagger means each thing happens a little later in the timeline. So let's bring our next superhero down. Let's lock all of our other tracks so that we're not going to accidentally readjust them. I like what's happening there. If I click up here, I can move this next superhero into a position where I think it might work. I can right click on that footage and create that same crop and zoom. So crop and zoom, then select pan and zoom. You can see the start screen is zooming in on the character. We want the opposite, so we hit the reverse arrows. Now the start is illuminated and it starts from the inside and zooms outward. Let's put a little zoom effect and see how we want. Let's try right there and see what happens. That seems to bring him in, makes him disappear a little too quickly. I want that to happen a little longer. So I stretch that out. I would like him to be a little bigger. Let's click on him up in the preview window and expand his size a bit. Let's see how that looks. I'm going to reposition where he zooms. Again, this is all just using your eye. There's no perfect way to do it. I just know what I want to see things do, right? I want to see people come in. I want to see them a certain size in frame, and I'm just using my judgment on all of this. So here, we want that same effect. See how this next dude just kind of appears? We don't want that. We want him to dissolve into frame. So up in the transitions tab, because I still have DISS in the search bar, it's holding on to that dissolve. Be careful of that, because if you switch, it will show you nothing because I still have something in the search bar. You have to backspace out of that and then search around to have all your other effects show up. But I want that dissolve effect from all. Let's bring that down. Now I will do a short dissolve here. So there's a dissolve in. Let's also dissolve back out. We'll put a dissolve at the end of this. Shrink it down a bit. There we go. So he dissolves in and then he dissolves away. The same stagger. Let's see if we can find another guy's name. Fellow's name? Stephen Task. This chroma key's a little weird. I'm seeing too much white on the outside of this one. Let me see if I can take that out a bit. Right about there. The edge feather. I don't want any edge feather. I want it mostly black. Let's right click on the footage, click on crop and zoom. Let's start by zooming in on Stephen Task's name. I think that's where I want to start, something like that. And let's see how that looks. All right, that kind of shoots right in. Highlight that, and up here, let's move that and put a little angle. Let's spin it the other way, something like this. And let's see how that works. It's taking too long to get to it. I want it to start a little sooner. It's coming in pretty good, but it looks like it's probably going to disappear too harshly. Let's grab our dissolve and put a dissolve transition at the end so it fades away. You can see what's happening here. I'm just stacking a superhero, then the text, then another superhero, then more text, and I'm allowing that original flashing comic strip portion underneath it to play. So it's creating these layers of interesting things that are all happening at the same time. One other thing I noticed is there wasn't just a super clean zoom effect going on. There was almost sort of a motion blur. And the way you can create that is actually go into your effects and look up blur. I took this blur effect, brought it down into a track above, and you can automatically see this cool thing that it does, right? It starts blurring what's going on. It's super heavy though. If we double left click on that, it will open up the control rate of this zoom and blur, and we can dial it back a bit. I just want a slight zoom effect. Okay, can you see as I bring up the alpha, look at the superhero. See how he just starts to get a bit of a blur effect to him? Nice, that's what we want. We don't want a super heavy effect. We just want this slight blur as they move past. So I like that. We have these characters come in, they have a slight blur. You can still read the words, but it's giving us that tunnel effect. And that's starting to move in the right direction. The great thing about Filmora is you can get in and you can really tweak each one of these transitions and effects to get them to do exactly what you want. Once we have that all together, you'll have this effect. Now, I've already done a video about how to do the text image at the end and have video show through the letters. That's the same intro effect that I showed how to do in Filmora. If you want me to cover it for the Marvel thing, I can, but I've already shown you how to do that. Once you export all of this, you can use this entire project, bring it back in as a piece of footage, and put it under your text so that it shows through, and you can create it just like an intro. It wasn't exactly what Marvel did, but it was a good idea to show you sort of what you can do to create that logo effect at the end. All right, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, leave comments down below and I'll try to solve any of the issues that I may not have covered here or anything that you don't quite understand. Get out there and apply this thing to something you're working on. Peace.